Oh, we should sing a grace. Should we sing Amazing? What should we sing? Let's sing. We should be singing some hymn. Come on. Anybody got a little tune? No. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. More together more often. That was a beautiful way that was a beautiful way to begin. I am so honored that you're here tonight. It was a gift that this lady on my left, and if you don't know who she is, we all know who she is, right? Eleanor, called me, I can't remember how many weeks ago, and said, Christy, would you please open up your home so that we can debut the 7th? Am I right?
Yes, one to go.
Seventh? Say what it is.
Seventh volume in the Merton series of world religions, basically. Yes.
Imagine. Mm-hmm. And this is an incredible replication of these amazing world happenings.
Yes.
I mean, there's no place else that this is. So I, of course, said yes. If you can figure out the calendar that works, and by George, the miracle worker over here did. Eleanor, thank you for organizing this. This is the kind of party that I like to have. I've just opened the doors, and you all appear like miracle angels, and Eleanor makes it all happen.
No, it's actually Sydney.
So let's all thank Eleanor and Sydney. But let's thank Eleanor. Thank you, Eleanor. So sweet. Thank you. And I'm not going to stay up here long because they're all the angels that have been making this happen, but I can't leave and step over here without saying something of thanks to my dear friend Ray, who we have been, I don't even know what we call ourselves, but we have been in trouble together for many years. And I'll never forget when because I didn't know the years. There were a lot of years I heard, but it was before my time. And I came in 1968, and she was kind of like, oh my gosh, Christine, most of my friends have kind of left town, and I don't really know you, but let's have dinner together or something. And so she would be here for a few weeks in the summer, and we did, and we just clicked. And all kinds of miracles have happened since. 25 years of the Festival of Faith. Partner. And there we go.
And the last time we stood here on the steps together, it was for the Merton book on the Loretto nuns, and tell them what you did.
Oh, well, I just went upstairs and I brought down my favorite doll, which is a china doll that was my grandmother's, which is a visitation nun, which has the connection. And so it was really fun. And I'm only sorry tonight that I don't have a doll of Thomas Merton. Otherwise, I would be here with it and telling you how special it is to have you here. But anyway, it's a joy to be here. And one of the things, as I work with Tad Smith, who is here at the University of Louisville, and the Environmental Institute, which we started on the whole subject of health. And if you don't have your little pin of the Circle of Harmony and Health, please take one, or a whole handful. But the thing I'm most fascinated about is the spiritual health, of course, aspect, and in particular fascinated about how we have an entire U.S. society who doesn't believe that anything weird is happening with the climate. And the thing that's interesting to me about that is what role did the evolution of Christianity play in eliminating the indigenous people's knowledge of the interconnection between the elements and our human and natural health. So thank you for being here, and I'm supposed to turn this over to
yes.
Do you,
whoever. Introduce Jonathan Montaldo, who is the editor of the entire Merton series. And I mean, how can you introduce Jonathan? He's the one that was chosen to edit all of Merton's journals by Harper and Row, and did the Intimate Merton. been the head of the International Merton Society, and he's been the series editor for all of these volumes, and we are so lucky he came into town just to speak to you. Jonathan.
Thank you. I'm the lucky one to be here, and even though I have papers, I'm just making a very short and brief statement. Last week, I discovered a poet and a poem that I'd like to share with you tonight. The name of the poem is If You Knew by Ellen Bass. What if you knew you'd be the last person to touch someone? If you were taking tickets, for example, at the theater, tearing them, giving back the ragged stubs, you might take care to touch that palm. Brush your fingertips along the lifeline's crease. When a man pulls his wheeled suitcase too slowly through the airport, when the car in front of me doesn't signal, when the clerk at the pharmacy won't say thank you, I don't remember they're going to die. A friend told me she'd been with her aunt. They just had lunch, and the waiter, a young gay man with plum black eyes, joked as he served the coffee, kissed her aunt's powdered cheek when they left. Then they walked half a block, and her aunt dropped dead on the sidewalk. How close does the dragon's spume have to come? How wide the crack in heaven have to split? What would people look like if we could see them as they are, soaked in honey, stung and swollen, reckless, pinned against time? What if I knew this would be the last time I would stand on steps with some of the most beautiful people who populate my life? What if I knew I would get no more chances to look at your faces from a height, to scan your kindness on this special evening in Christy Brown's welcoming home? What if we all knew without doubt how fortunate we are to be alive and productive, open to loving one another deeply, given half a chance, and lives without so much fear? We should take care of what we take for granted. Tonight might be the last book launch you will attend. Tonight you will buy the last book you'll buy for the shelves of all the books you've bought, but will never read before your light goes out. But my dears, don't let that heavy thought be an impediment to opening your wallet. To sustain the work of Fons Vitae, concerning, as Thomas Merton called it, the spiritual genius of the American indigenous peoples. So open your purse and join us in aspirational solidarity with indigenous traditions of religious imagination and their longings for the holy. It's a chance to learn another sacred way to live, the only lives we'll ever live in these temporary bodies. Thank you for being here, why ever you are here, whether to honor your enthusiasms for Thomas Merton, or to keep your strong friendships with Gray Henry and her Neville Blakemore, or perhaps you've come to honor Anne Ogden, an incomparable proofreader, among her other identities. Or perhaps you're here, like we on these steps are here, to thank Eleanor Bingham Miller for her generosity. Like Mrs. Brown's only begotten son, Owsley, she has produced more than one volume of Fons Vitae's 8-volume Thomas Merton series. Listen, it's more apropos to call this event a landing rather than a launch. The launch of tonight's book began 3 years ago when Gray Henry lifted her baton, and we invited scholars to write their minds on Merton and Indigenous wisdom. And then we walked the long road of copy editing, of making academic writing less awful, then the long hours by computer light toiled by Neville Blakemore in designing the book, and by Anne Ogden trying to jot every I and cross all T's. There will still be mistakes in our book, of course. Revising mistakes, like being humble for all of us, my dears, is endless. Don't think Thomas Merton wrote about Indigenous American wisdom as an act of Christian charity. Indigenous people needed nothing from Thomas Merton. He rather hoped for something good from them. Merton needed them to receive a blessing he could find nowhere else. He studied the wisdom of native peoples not so he could write more about God, but so he could feel God, like he felt the wind in the pine trees, that he could smell God's trace in the grasses, so that he could honor soul in everything that declares its joy in just being alive. Il piacere di vivere, in the light, living under the sun and moon and a billion stars. Merton's spirituality was his effort to decolonize his mind of every delusion of his self-superiority. Merton encountered all peoples and their religions with a profound bow of respect. The Sufis, the mystic Orthodox, the Buddhists, the Jews, the Taoists, the Protestants, all First Nations peoples, and the Hindus. He read their sacred scriptures on his knees. He asked for a blessing from them he knew he could never give to himself. In my favorite essay in this new book, it's Merton's introduction, written in Spanish, to an Argentinian edition of his work. Merton offers us full stop the evidence of his Unitarian and fully Catholic mind. One thing I know, that in my destiny of being at once a contemplative, a Christian, and an American, I cannot satisfy the requirements of my vocations with anything partial or provincial. I cannot be just a North American. I cannot be a partial American, and I cannot be a partial Catholic, which would be even sadder. To me, Catholicism is not confined within the boundaries of a culture, a nation, a period of time, or one race. My faith is not merely the Catholicism of the Irish in the United States, or the splendid and vital Catholicism reborn during the last World War of my native France. Even if I admire the great cathedrals and glorious past of Catholicism in Latin America, my Catholicism goes beyond this Hispanic heritage. I find it impossible to believe Catholicism is strongly connected to one group's destiny, that it becomes the expression of the economic illusions of any given social class. My Catholicism was there at the beginning of the world. The first humans were Christ's image, and they already contained in their entrails Christ the Savior. This is what I find so important regarding America and the great role of my vocation in it, to know America in its full extent, to be a complete American, a human being of the whole hemisphere, of the whole new world. He ends by saying, "May all who read this book, and I who have written it, remain united in this ideal and this struggle. Oh, brothers and sisters, I am glad that this book has united us in Christ. But the book was not necessary. We are already one in our love of truth, our passion for freedom, and in our adoration of the living God." And so, friends, let us think about all this tonight before we sleep. Who would we be, and how would we act if we knew we were all everywhere already one? Who would we be, and how would we act tomorrow morning? And if we could arise and know ourselves just as we all truly are, soaked in honey, stung and swollen, reckless, pinned against time. And now it's my pleasure to present Ann Ogden.
That was beautiful, John. It was beautiful. I am the proofreader. Do you know what this means? It means that I am responsible for all the typos, spelling, and punctuation errors in this book. It's a good reason not to be thanked, or even acknowledged. My excuses for the mistakes in the book are, first of all, it was a pretty hard book to proofread. There are a lot of different essays by different authors who spelled things differently and used commas differently. And for example, do you spell native people's capital N, capital P, or lowercase n, lowercase p? And I would think I would get someplace and I would think, well, 20 pages ago, I think I saw it a different way. So, first of all, that was made it a complicated thing. The second thing, and most important, is that I loved reading the book. And when you're a proofreader, if you're actually reading the book, you're missing the commas, the punctuation, everything else. So I would, and when I commend this book to you, and when you're reading it, and when you find all these wonderful typos, just remember that that's probably the part that I was really enjoying. I am not an academic. Many of these essays were written by academics. I'm not a Merton scholar or a scholar about Native Americans, but from just a general reader, it's a wonderful book, which is why there's so many typos in it, probably. I think you'll learn a lot about Merton's activism in the 60s and about his appreciation of Native American spiritual traditions. There's one paragraph that I think is kind of the essence of what this book is about, and I'd like to read it to you, it's a short paragraph. It was about, it's in the chapter that St. John wrote, not the St. John, the author St. John. Merton's correspondence with poets, activists, anthropologists, and historians familiar with and sensitive to the plight of indigenous peoples stoked the flames of Merton's prophetic ire against the unjust and inhumane treatment of indigenous peoples and their natural habitats. These dialogues contributed to his sympathetic understanding of the many cultural and spiritual riches of native peoples, capital N, capital P, to which most European immigrants and subsequent Americans had been blind and deaf. Merton appears to have quickly grasped the inner spiritual dynamics and even mystical experiences of Native Americans, owing to his extensive study of religious experience in many traditions. His own experiences and his widening understanding of the meaning and manifestations of natural contemplation bolstered his awareness of the immanent presence and creativity of the divine in the natural world. It's a wonderful book. I hope you will read it. I don't think there were any typos in that paragraph. And I will hand this over to the typesetter.
Come up a
Christy, thank you. Eleanor, thank you.
Up a step.
The sheer joy of working on this book was working with Jonathan, who knows more about Merton, perhaps, his life and work than Merton himself did. And with Anne, who's indefatigable, and fearless in the face of serial comments.
Okay, Neville, get Paul. Okay, will you introduce Paul, please?
I'd like to introduce you to the person who actually, in fact, knows more about Merton, every jot and tittle, than any Jonathan Montaldo does. Dr. Paul Pearson is the director of the Thomas Merton Center at Bellarmine University, which is the largest archive of Merton's work. It really is it's a place that you could visit as if you were visiting an art exhibit. It's beautifully done. There's some very interesting things, more than just interesting things, about how wide and deep Thomas Merton's reach was as a writer. So it is my great pleasure to introduce my friend, Dr. Paul Pearson.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, Christy. And thank you, most of all, Gray, for the wonderful gift of this book. I'm not going to try and follow Jonathan's wonderful eloquence, but Gray delivered copies of the book to me just before Christmas, a lovely present, and then started pestering me for a blurb for the website to promote the book. And things have been busy, and I delayed, and it got more and more urgent, and so eventually I had to sit down and read the book. And that was a real blessing. It is quite an extraordinary book, which I really commend to you. And as I was reading it, the thing that really struck me was that through the course of the book, we really hear Merton's historical voice, his spiritual voice, and his prophetic voice. That we hear his historical voice educating us about the First Nations peoples. And certainly for myself, as a foreigner here, that was quite an education for me. That wasn't my own background. And then we hear his spiritual voice, of course, seeking out that spirituality among these peoples and stirring our consciences about how they were treated. And then we hear his prophetic voice, as always, calling us to action. In particular, I think, in our current age, reminding us of our relationship to Mother Earth, which was something that was so central to these indigenous peoples. So Gray suggested that I just read the blurb that I ended up writing, so bear with me. Merton and Indigenous Wisdom, like the other volumes in the Fons Vitae Thomas Merton series, once more demonstrates the incisive, boundless enthusiasm of Merton for the divine fullness of our human condition in all its glorious manifestations. Merton's breathtaking openness to other cultures and traditions, so evident in this volume, along with his all-embracing universal vision and wisdom, encourages us all to be, like him, builders of bridges, not walls. So with this wonderful gift to us all in this book, perhaps we can conclude, I think I'm concluding, am I? Yes. By a final song. And next Friday is the 31st of January, so we'll mark Merton's 105th birthday. It doesn't seem like yesterday that he turned 100. So this wonderful book series, I think, has been a gift to us all, and I'm sure Merton would appreciate it as a gift from him and a gift to him as well. I'm not a good singer, so maybe the person who started Amazing Grace would lead us in Happy Birthday.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Thomas. Happy birthday to you.
This is obviously an evening of celebrating what I think Kentucky knows most beautifully, which is hospitality. And in my heart, I believe that was one of the reasons that Thomas Merton felt so comfortable here and loved this place like he apparently did. So we want to say, in celebration of his birthday, please let the hospitality continue. We have more, I believe, more food, and I know we have more beverages. Thank you all for coming and enjoy. Bye-bye.